I'm Mimika Cooney, and welcome to Mimika TV, the place to build a brilliant business. Today, we are talking about how to get booked as a podcast guest. Jessica Rhodes is the founder of Interview Connections, a service for booking outstanding podcast guests. Her team of booking agents works with podcasters to find and book guests for their shows and represents dozens of highly qualified expert guests to connect them with hosts for their own interviews. Jessica is the host of her web show, Interview Connections TV, and she's the host of Roads to Success podcast. Jessica has shared the stage at several conferences, including Podcast Movement and Podcast New England, with a dozen of other podcasters. So welcome, Jessica. Welcome to Mimika TV. So excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's always got a little bit of an itch, so you got to scratch, one of those live TV, right?
Live TV.
Well, I'm so excited. Yeah, this is what I love about Blab, is that anything goes, right?
Yep.
And the great thing is it's great. It's so nice to be able to connect with people in real time.
Yeah.
And for those who are new to Mimika TV, it really pays to pay attention and to stay, because Jessica is going to be donating to this week's goodie giveaway, because every week our guests give away a really good giveaway to one lucky viewer. So it stays to play, and you've got to be in it to win it. So pay attention. Towards the end, we'll be asking a question based on the content we cover. And the first person who can type really quickly and get the answer in will be able to win. So yay, party started, right? Well, we're going to say welcome to everyone who's joined us. I see Scott, Sabrina, Abdul, Jonathan, JKB, Justin, Kim, Harris, Tanya, Mikkel. Thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure to think about any questions you might want to ask Jessica.
Okay.
And thanks for the props. You see the little bubbles under your face? We call those
do,
props.
but I don't see the chat for some reason.
Oh, you don't? It should be on the right-hand side.
I know. It usually is on all the other blabs, but for some reason it's not showing up for me.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure.
But you can monitor that. I don't want to interrupt things.
So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to kick this off with a few questions. Now, I know a lot of us out here who are listening are eager to get more press, right? Who doesn't want to get more press? So let's start by, giving our audience some really good takeaway meat and potato tips. So let's start with one of the few things is, what are the mistakes that you see people make when trying to get booked on a show?
I think that one of the biggest mistakes I see when people are trying to get booked is they don't have their why down. When you're trying to get booked as a podcast guest, you have to understand that what you're really doing is some sales work. You need to sell yourself as a great guest for the podcast that you want to be on. So I see a lot of times on, Facebook and forums, and people are kind of putting themselves out there. I want to be a guest. And you ask them, okay, well, what do you have to offer? And it's like, well, I'm a coach. And you're like, okay, just saying you're a coach doesn't mean you're going to be a great guest. So you want to know that one thing that not only you are the best at or you are an expert in, but what gives you the credibility to talk about that. And then what your story is, like what sets you apart from the rest. So the big thing is having a lack of confidence seems to be the biggest mistake, because if you don't feel confident in your story, if you can't look at someone in the eye or write them an email in the eye and say, I know that my story and what I have to share would provide amazing value for your listeners. I know that this information is going to help them grow their business, or, if you're in a different market, it's going to help them improve their lives. You've got to have extreme confidence and speak with conviction about specifically the topic that you would be a great guest for. So having that confidence is really going to go a long way. Like everything else could be crap. You could have a terrible website. You could have no one sheet. But if you look at someone and you confidently say what you would talk about, and you say, I know that this would give your listeners a ton of value, that's really going to set you apart from most other people out there trying to get booked.
Right. And then what it basically means is your point of view, right? What is your unique point of view that because I know as a guest myself, having been a guest and being an interviewer, I want to know what I want to title this talk about, right? So for today, it was very easy to know that Jessica talks about how to get booked on a podcast. So, and I'm sure with a lot of other shows you've done, that's pretty much your POV, your point of view. So it's easy to get booked that way.
Right.
If I get pitched by a guest that wants to be on the show, first of all, I need to know that they fit the show, because, I'm not talking about sharing recipes here. I'm talking about building a business. So of course, they have to be in the right niche or niche, whichever way you like to say. And then knowing exactly what they're strong on, because I have to agree with you. I've seen so many pitches, and sometimes I just have to refuse them because I don't see anything unique about what they're offering.
Right.
So yeah, that's some great tips. So what's another mistake you think that people make?
Well, I did mention that if you do have that very high level of confidence and that, unique point of view, that unique selling proposition, you are going to stand yourself apart. However, you do need to have a strong online presence. If you want to be booked for podcast interviews, you have to understand that you are putting yourself out there into new media and you are aligning yourself with that show. So Michael Stelzner, who hosts Social Media Examiner, he's a former client of ours, and he's talked about how when he has a guest on his podcast, they become a brand ally. They then promote his show and his business. And when a podcaster has you on their show, that is a tacit endorsement of you and your business. So that's a relationship to be taken very seriously. I'm not going to bring someone on my podcast who I don't believe that their business and their service and their expertise is something legitimate and actually valuable. So you have to take that seriously and thus have a good online presence that they wouldn't be embarrassed to promote. So have a website that looks like it wasn't built in 1995. Have a strong social media presence. And I really think we're past the days. I think people know that. When I first started booking interviews a couple of years ago, a lot of clients said, I want people that have 10,000 followers on Twitter, at least. I don't want anyone that has less than that number of followers. And now it's pretty well known that, hey, you can buy that number of followers. It doesn't mean you're going to be a great guest. So it's really about, having a clean looking online presence, being on social media. Don't worry too much about how many likes and followers you have, but be active. Now with Facebook business pages being kind of obsolete, they're really there to run Facebook ads because people, a lot of times I'll post things and 2 people see it unless I boost it for $5. So I wouldn't worry too much about how many people are liking your page, but also on your Facebook profile, are you mutually friends with people in your target market, right? So if somebody pitches me and wants to be on Roads to Success, if I see on Facebook that we've got 100 mutual friends, that right there is saying, all right, well, 100 of my friends can't be wrong, So having that online presence and being someone that the podcaster would want to align their show with is really important.
Exactly, because you're going to be, pushing the podcast content as well as the podcast that pushing your content. And they want to know that if they're going to be recommending you as an expert, first of all, that you say what you're going to provide the value that you say you can.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me started with visual branding. You know me and the branding and looking pretty. That. And I know how I like to make things look good because, we need eye candy online, especially for an online business. If it doesn't look good, it doesn't give that sense of trust. Like,
and can we talk?
Know your stuff.
Can we really talk really quickly about branding? I mean, you're a photographer.
Go ahead.
You definitely know probably a lot more than me, but but the very basics of it is having, I think profile pictures are so important and they really go kind of overlooked. So having a good profile photo is important because that is the first impression that people have with you when they're checking out your page or on your website, having on your about page or having your photo really there so people can see you is super important. I mean, we've had people that apply to be a guest expert with us and we go online, like we can't find a picture of them or the one picture is like a cropped out fuzzy photo. So I think as long as you have a nice photo of yourself, you're looking in the camera, it looks professional, that goes a long way. I mean, it's like...
Yeah, first impressions count, right? It is super important.
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, we lost you there a little bit. What were you saying? Were you searching? So you've tried to search and this is the thing. I'm sure you could talk about how and this is one of the tips we could go into, right? How to make it easier for people to actually use stuff, right?
Yeah. So you said how to make it easier for, what was that last part?
Well, you're saying like you have to search for someone's photo and it's very hard to get a photo of them. Like you're not making easy for in your case, like Angela's job to get to book you and send you your information if they can't find things like your profile photo.
Right. Yeah. When you get booked as a podcast guest, you're making yourself a media personality, so people are going to want a good photo of you. Most podcasters, they'll ask you, hey, can you send me your headshot? but a lot of times they don't, and they just go on Facebook and grab your profile image. So if you're thinking, where'd they get that photo? Well, it was on Facebook. It's your profile photo. So making sure that you have nice photos of you out there online. These are digital times. We are not meeting people face to face. You're not going to someone's studio and having them take a photo of you right there behind the mic. They are depending on the photos you have online. So if your branding and your photos are not consistent with how you want to be presenting yourself, you're going to have some problems there. So having nice profile photos, having nice photos on your website. I did a video recently talking about the importance of, if you're going to be booked as a podcast guest, having a branded website. So if you have a business and you're offering products or services, you're going to have a website that says what people can pay you for. Like I have interviewconnections.com. However, I have jessicarhodes.biz that is my blog and has my press page and links to interviews. So if you want to be booked as a podcast guest, probably the biggest tip I can give you is to establish a personal brand separate from the business in which you're getting paid for, the service and products in which you're getting paid for. And so I kind of made this transition last year, and I invested in a graphic designer, and I had a logo created and a website, just jessicarhodes.biz, to kind of establish myself as a thought leader and an authority figure in podcasting, and not just this person that was behind interviewconnections.com. So having that personally branded website and that personal brand is going to set you apart, because when we look for podcast guests and we go to their business website and we're searching for that, we're like, well, what's their story? And what are the things that they can talk about? Podcasters don't just want to read about, your prices and your services. They want to read about you and read your blog and listen to your podcast and watch your videos.
Definitely. So and I think this is where people get it mixed up, especially if your company name is not your name. Like in my personal instance, I had actually did a whole brand makeover because I used to use a generic name. And then when I decided to brand myself as the brand, now everyone knows mimikacooney.com is where you find out about me. And so it's I think people find it difficult to, especially if you're providing a service, to separate the brand person. And wouldn't you say it's almost like we have to think of ourselves as little mini celebrities? Now, if you are endorsing a product, which is what you're doing on a podcast, right? You're kind of endorsing this person's podcast,
yes,
and they endorsing you. Like, what do you want it to say?
Yeah, I actually did a blog about that, of establishing yourself as a celebrity. And we kind of feel like, oh, I'm not a celebrity. We kind of feel weird about it. But honestly, you are. You are a public figure. If you're going out there and getting interviewed and establishing yourself as somebody that has value to share, and you are the speaker who's giving that value, you're making yourself a celebrity. And celebrity is extremely subjective because, okay, if you're in the business podcasting space, most likely you think that John Lee Dumas is a celebrity or Michael Stelzner is a celebrity. But if they were to walk into, a coffee shop and say, everyone want my autograph, everyone say, who the hell are you? Sorry, who the heck are you? So it's subjective, right? Michael Stelzner is telling me when we were at New Media Expo a couple years ago, he said, it's so funny. I go into these conferences and everyone wants to talk to me, get pictures and stuff like that. And then as soon as you walk out the door, you're in a whole new light. So celebrity is totally subjective. But if you want to position yourself as somebody who is an in-demand expert and you want people to ask you to be on their show, you have to embrace that and position yourself as one.
So definitely. So we've covered branding and why it's important to have that unique point of view. Your profile photo, and as I said, this is something I work with entrepreneurs, is doing their visual brand makeover for their photos to their website, because it's amazing how many people you either see a picture of them online and then you meet them and you go, oh, is that the same person? Do you want to be the real person?
Oh my gosh. I can't tell you how many times, because I go to conferences a lot and I'll see people and I'm just like, wow, your profile photo looks pretty different.
Yeah. So we want the real you online. Now, I know this is something that I feel is super valuable as well. If someone is going to pitch me to be on my show, I want to know more about them. So let's talk a little bit about the one pager and why that's important, or the one sheet, you like to call it.
Yes. One sheets I love because it kind of takes you as a guest and simplifies it and puts it on a one-page PDF. I mean, there's no way this is going to have your whole life story. In fact, it's important that the one pager has a brief bio, so on my one sheet, and I have basically a version of my one pager at jessicarhodes.biz/press. If anyone wants to check it out, that's a good example of a one sheet. and, it has a little bit about my business, what I do, kind of establishes some credibility with the shows that I host. And, I host the Podcast Producers, which is selected by iTunes as a how-to podcast show. So you put a little bit of that stuff in there to position yourself as somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. And then the ends is, I'm a mom and I live in Rhode Island. I have 2 kids. So you'd want a little bit of that personal aspect too. There's no way my one sheet is going to say Jessica Rhodes graduated from Temple University and her major, stop. As soon as someone tells me what they majored in, I'm like, all right. I mean, if you're 22 and you just got out of college, maybe it's relevant, but you don't need to go into this whole big background. You want those points. I talk about how you want your one sheet and your bio that you give to podcasters to have the hooks. So people ask for a 50-word bio. Man, those better be the best 50 words that spotlight you as the person that's talking about this topic, the best person to talk about this topic. So you're going to spend a lot of good, you need to spend some time on your bio and really think, all right, if this is the only thing people read about me, is this going to make me look good? Is this going to make me look like an in-demand expert? So you want to position yourself well. And can I just say, please write your bio in third person. Make it look like someone else wrote it about you, okay? That's another position.
Yes, like Jessica Rhodes is, just like I read Jessica's bio in the beginning, is in the third person.
Yeah, let me tell you a
introducing you.
Let me tell you a secret. I wrote that bio myself.
Oh, yay! Good job, right? But if you think about it, like, if you're going to speak on stage, and this is what I've seen as well, like, if you're being hired to speak on stage, usually the PR person is going to print off your one pager, and that's what they're going to use to announce you on stage. So like we're introducing our guests before show, your bio is super important. It's going to tell the audience in like 1 minute or less exactly what it is that you do. And you mentioned the hook. Now, I think some people kind of like, what do you mean by that? What I love to see as an interviewer is like 3 topics or areas of discussion that give me an idea of what we can talk about. So give us some tips about how that works.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to know, like, what is your expertise and what gives you the right to talk about this? So some people like, if you want to get interviewed on something, you need some credibility and something that shows that, hey, you have experience in talking about this, that you have success. I mean, there was one guest a couple of years ago, I remember, and she said that she was an expert in branding and business. And every time she told a story on a podcast, it was like these hypothetical situations. Like, we'll say, for example, you have a hairdresser, I'm like, well, have you ever actually, coached people in this? It was very fabricated. So you need real examples and real experience. So what I mean by hooks is in your bio, things that the host reads and they think, wow, that immediately says that they are successful. Like one example would be they're a #1 best-selling author. A lot of podcasters, when they read that you're a best-selling author with a sales book, they're going to think, well, you're definitely a sales expert. Someone has given you that credibility. A hook that when Corey Coates and our podcast got into the Apple section of how to podcast in iTunes, that I put that in my bio because that's a big hook. I help produce a show that is now featured in a small section of iTunes. So I put that in there because that shows I have credibility to talk about this stuff. So you want to think about, hey, what have you done that shows that you are somebody who, has the permission to talk about this stuff. Like if you were featured in an entrepreneur.com article as featured in entrepreneur.com. So you have to think about what would the one thing somebody reads and think, oh, wow, they are definitely it. And it could be humor too. Like I'd love to share a funny story. I interviewed David Ralph, who's the host of Join Up Dots. And
I love him. He's so cool. I was on his show. He is so funny.
He's great. Yeah. So and David has a lot of hooks and a lot of success and credibility. However, he emailed me and we've booked our clients on his show, and he emailed me to talk about being a guest on my podcast. And his subject line was, is there a lack of sexy middle-aged Englishmen on roads to success? So basically, without getting me, without reading his bio, which I joked with him, because his bio is in first person, it's really long on his site. I said, David, I didn't even read your bio; it's too long for me. But he had humor. He knows how to
tell a story.
Yeah, so his humor and that joke right away was the hook that said, he is somebody that I'm going to have a good time with on a podcast. He's not going to be dry. He's going to be funny. We're going to have a good conversation. So, maybe you're thinking, I just can't think of a hook. I am new, but I'm super funny and I'm really I'm a comedian and I would have a great time. Then put some humor into your pitch. So you got to think of a way to get a host's attention, because there are so many form emails going out, so many just very boring templated emails going out. You got to think of a way to get people's attention.
Definitely. And of course, then it also helps to give the host an idea of what they can interview, to make it interesting, because we're always looking, it's like the media. We always want new content. We always want great guests. We want to be able to offer our audience value and something of interest that they haven't maybe heard before. So,
yeah.
And I think, wouldn't you say, like, I know from the people I speak to a lot, is say they find it very weird to brag about themselves, but that's why maybe putting in the third person helps. Would you say maybe have someone else write it for you if you feel like you can't write it?
I think if you have a hard time bragging about yourself, you need to be more confident. I mean, it is a hard thing, but like you have to, I mean, if you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, you have to know in your gut and in your heart, you have to be confident. You have to be able to say to someone like, I am the best person to talk about this. And if you don't believe that and you have a hard time with that, well, like we need to have a different conversation. Yeah. So, I mean, you could have somebody else write it for you, but I believe you're probably the best person to do it because you know all that. I mean, you can absolutely get some help from a copywriter, from a business coach, no doubt about it. I mean, you could definitely do that, but yeah, you've got to know. And so talking about the topics, what I recommend and what I've helped my guest bookers on is when they're pitching our clients, having that email, if you can fill in the blanks of the sentence, we say our client, but if you're talking about yourself, I would be a great guest to talk about, fill in the blank, on your show, because I know that it would help your listeners with fill in the blank. So tell them the specific topic that you could talk about, and then say how that would help their listeners. And if you can also say, I know that your listeners are, fill in the blank. So I know that your listeners are people in their 30s or just whatever, fill in the blank. So I know that your listeners are, so my topic on fill in the blank would be perfect for them to help them fill in the blank. So podcasters and show hosts, their goal is to produce episodes that are going to provide value for their listeners, because that's the only way they're going to keep their listeners coming back, is if their listeners are getting value, they're going to keep coming back. So if you can prove to a host that what you have to say is going to be valuable to their listeners, then you've got your foot in the door for a great interview.
That's really some great content. Well, Jonathan Tripp has asked here, how many words do you prefer in a bio? Is there a certain word count that you advise, number of sentences, paragraphs? What do you think?
We usually say like 3 to 5 sentences is pretty much the bare minimum. I see his question now. So 3 to 5 sentences is the bare minimum. My bio on my one sheet is probably like 50 to 75 words. Usually when people ask me for a 50-word bio, I do about the first 2 paragraphs. So yeah, 2 to 3 paragraphs and maybe 50 to 75 words is good. But 3 to 5 sentences is probably the bare minimum.
So something easily that someone can say in a minute, or what I personally love is when it's in text format, so I can copy and paste it into like a blog post or on social media, something like that. I think designers probably would know the answer to this, because I like the PDF one sheets because I think that it is important that you have some branding and design to it. So a plain Word document, while it's a lot easier to copy and paste, doesn't always look the best. However, there are some PDFs that I can easily just highlight the text and then paste into a Word document. And then some, I don't know, it doesn't work. I can't highlight. So I don't know. I personally prefer like to send an attachment as my one pager as a PDF, and then I attach a text TXT file. So it's literally just no branding. It's just copy and paste this directly into it, and makes my life a lot easier.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to think about what is going to make the podcast host's job easier. So if you can email them the bio, say, hey, here's my one sheet. What else do you need? Do you need my bio? Do you need an intro? That's why I like to have my press page, because you can easily copy and paste from our WordPress site. So, but yeah, anything you can do to make the host job easier is great.
Okay, so definitely some great tips. So for those who recently joined us, we talked about understanding your point of view, knowing what you're going to talk about, having your one pager and your bio ready, and be able to provide value to a podcast interviewer, so they know, or host, so they know exactly what they're going to hire you for. Now, let's talk about the process, because I know we could. There's a bunch of things that I'm sure you and I would agree on. How do you prepare and be a good guest so you get invited on guests on shows again? Like, in other words, the whole process of preparing for a show. What were your tips would you advise?
Well, number one, listen to the podcast before you go on the show. Every podcast is going to be a little bit different. Every host is going to have a slightly different style or a slightly different format. So, I mean, if you want to be interviewed a lot, I mean, realistically, you're not going to be subscribing and listening to every episode of every show you go on. So at the very least, make sure you listen to 1 or 2 episodes of that person's show before you are on. Like I had your blab on, I think it was earlier this week. I logged on and had it playing while I was working because I wanted to make sure that I was familiar with your style and with your show. So I didn't come on and was completely clueless, so listen to the show. The other reason why that's good is if you listen to an episode of their podcast and you liked, start the interview by complimenting them on that episode, because it's a great way to break the ice. Usually the best parts of a podcast interview are after the first 15 minutes, because it's also a little bit awkward and you're still trying to figure out you mesh well. I mean, if it's a really good interviewer, it can rock from the very beginning. But I would say most podcast interviews, it takes 10 or 15 minutes before both parties are really warmed up. So if you can start your podcast interview by complimenting the host, you are taking initiative. Like think about when you go to a conference or a party and there are always those few people that they're so easy to talk to. Like they always have something to say. They always got like a story or a joke or something. So as the guest, if you can be that person on the call, like I can't even tell you, you're just going to make things so much easier. Like when I get on a podcast and my guest, they're talking and they've got stories to share, I'm like, I immediately feel this weight off my shoulders. Like I'm not going to have to pull teeth. Like Mimika, I'm sure you can agree when you're hosting these, you're like, I really hope that I'm not going to be pulling teeth. And
exactly.
I really hope I'm not going to run out of questions.
Something, like tell me a little bit about this, and you drag in like things are yes, no, like one word answers. Things that don't give an opportunity for some person to talk is really irritating. Now you mentioned stories. Now let's talk about that because I think that's key. Give us some tips on being able to tell your story.
Yeah. So, I mean, stories in a podcast, it's an audio only format. So you really need to make it a lively conversation. So it's engaging for the listener and you just add some more depth to the conversation. So you want to have stories to share so you can be painting a picture in the listener's head to make it a more entertaining interview to listen to. So when, say for example, someone asks you a question about marketing and you give your answer, do you have an example from your own experiences that you can share? Or do you have an example of something that you did with a client? Like when I'm interviewed and talking about podcast interviews and how to build your business podcast interviews, I have a few, stories to share that show that this is actually something that works. So here's an example. So when a lot of people, they want to be on shows with the highest number of downloads and they don't want to be on any show with a small number of downloads. And I try to talk about how it's important that you're not just looking at the downloads, but you're getting in front of the right audience. So since my business is a business that services podcasters and people that get interviewed, I tend to have an audience of my Roads to Success podcast tends to have a lot of podcasters who listen to it. So I interviewed my good friend Corey Coates a while back on the show, and he ended up getting a lot of clients who heard him on my podcast. And my podcast does not have a ton of downloads. It's like in the neighborhood of 100 an episode. I have a very small yet extremely niche audience. And so he ended up he's gotten a ton of paying clients who heard him on my podcast, yet it wasn't that I have a very small audience. It's just niche. But he was also on another show, which I'm not going to say the name of that one. But, the host was like, wow, 10,000 downloads. And he hasn't heard a peep from people who heard him on that show because it wasn't the right target market for him. So, so there's just an example of a story that kind of demonstrates my point. I could just say, you don't want to be on a show with high downloads because you want to be in front of a niche audience. But unless I have a story to back it up, people will be like, oh, you're just saying that. So
exactly. It's super true, right? And I think that's where the same thing, like we mentioned earlier about Facebook likes and things, thinking the more people have more likes they have, or the more downloads. And I think downloads are a very erroneous way of judging a podcast, because again, it's whether the content's relevant to you, whether the content you're going to provide to the show is going to be relevant. And I agree with you. I know you guys have also booked me on several podcast shows before, and I've been pleasantly surprised that I think that maybe the show is maybe young, or maybe it hasn't got a huge following, but I've been able to get a lot more engagement and through that kind of audience, as opposed to just being in a sea of, thousands of others. So totally agree with you on that.
And another thing about being on, newer shows or maybe just smaller shows is the thing that people don't often talk about is there's a very big difference between getting traditional media exposure and then being on a podcast. Being on a podcast is much more about your relationship with the host than it is about getting exposure to their audience. I think that getting exposure to their audience is the additional benefit. Me being on this blab with you is my primary benefit and focus is building my relationship with you, Mimika, not using you to get to your followers, right? So there's a benefit for both parties. We're all getting exposure. However, it's much more about strengthening our relationship as two entrepreneurs, helping each other out, that kind of thing. So in that, and I can give you countless stories of, people and guests who have gotten business from the host that interviewed them. So really look at it more about the relationship and not just about, you don't want to just use the host to get to your audience. You want to think about, hey, how can I help this host and what can our relationship be?
Definitely. And that's what I love about this online media is that, it doesn't have to be about the numbers. It's about the depth of the connection, which is great why you call yours interview connections. Because it is. It's how you connect with the right people and just making, the conversation relevant. So the audience is getting value and, as the guest, you're making the host look good too.
Right.
So what other topics would you say? Okay, so we've covered what not to do. And if you've recently joined us, make sure to listen to the replay. Jessica has covered a ton of really good content that you're going to love to be able to listen over. But just to give you a quick recap, we talked about branding while your Facebook profile photo is super important, first impressions. Your one pager, and remember to make note of that, is what you give out to your host so they can learn more about you. And we also talked about how to prepare. Now, what would you say would be tips for being on the show? Any sort of tips you can give to someone like now while it's live? Like what other things do you offer?
So, we already talked about starting out the show, and one little thing is to compliment their show and just be that person that comes to the interview not waiting for them to take the lead, but hey, what can you do to take initiative in that conversation? I mean, I'm not saying hijack the interview, it's their show and they're going to have questions, but don't hold back. Like if you have a compliment to give them or a story to share, gives to the conversation. Don't just wait for them to ask you questions. Also, use their name throughout the conversation. This is so little, but a person's name is their favorite word. They love to hear it. You've heard me say, if you go back and watch the replay, I have said Mimika several times. So use the other person's name just as a way to add more depth to the interview and show that you're not just there delivering answers, but you're actually having a conversation. Don't be afraid to ask the host questions. So it is an interview, and so they're primarily going to be asking you questions. However, you can really do a lot for a podcast if you ask the host a question, or maybe do it in a way that gets them to offer some feedback. So I did this earlier in the interview where we talked about the branding, and I said, Mimika, you're a photographer. I'm sure you know a lot about branding. So we actually had a little bit more of a back and forth, so I kind of pulled out your expertise, and that's another thing. Make the host look really good. So they're there to make you look good. But if you really focus on how can you spotlight them, they're going to want to promote that show a whole bunch because it's an episode where they were promoted. So I've tried to do that here too. You're a branding expert. You're a photographer, Mimika. You know a ton about this stuff. I want to help you get recognized by your audience as well because you're here helping me get recognized by the audience. So if both people on the show are helping each other get recognized for their expertise, it becomes a really powerful interview and a really great conversation. And lastly, offer something to the listeners and give a very clear call to action. And when I say call to action, I don't mean like buy my product or enroll in my course or something, but when the host is asking you, hey, how can listeners connect with you? Don't give them 5 different places to go because they will go nowhere. If you want to drive everyone to your Twitter page, say your Twitter handle and nothing else. If you want everyone to go to your blog, say your blog URL and nothing else. So don't make the mistake of giving people 10 different directions because they will have no idea where to go. I usually recommend giving that home-based website. So your name, URL, jessicarhodes.biz, Mimika Cooney, I think, .tv or mimikacooney.com.
Well, it's mimikacooney.com, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. To have your name.com is like, woo, that's fantastic.
It helps to have a different name, and then I can, yes, definitely keep it that way. But I have to agree, having it one place, it makes it easier for people to remember, because the other thing we mustn't forget is a podcast is usually people are listening to when they're either driving, like that's me in the carpool line, or doing something else, or maybe working, and they're actually paying attention. So you want to make it easy for them to remember you, not like //./biz/. That's really hard to. Exactly. Well, before we round it up, yes, Jonathan says Mimika like paprika. Yes, that's how I help people remember.
Mimika like paprika. So great.
Yes. And I need to give you my new one-pager, because I've actually, more of the stuff I'm doing now is the video side. So you and I need to chat offline, but definitely.
Yes.
But before we get into rounding up the show, I'm going to give opportunity for Jessica to tell you about her giveaway. Now, for everyone who's listening, we're going to ask this question, and we did mention it a few times. Jessica refers to it as the PDF that you usually send out to your host about you. What did she call that? It's a something pager. It's super easy. Like the first person who can type that into the comment section will be able to grab today's goodie giveaway. So tell us a little bit about the giveaway.
Yeah. So my giveaway is, it's an MP3 recording of a coaching call that I did, as well as the transcript. So if you're a reader, there's the transcript that you can download as a report and read it, or there's an MP3 that you can download and listen to. But it's a coaching call called Beyond the Stats, and it's about getting a huge return on investment as a podcast guest. And it's called Beyond the Stats because it's going to help you learn how to see all the benefits of being on a podcast beyond just the download stats and just the people that are going to be listening. So I talk a lot about relationships. I give specific examples of people growing their business through the one-on-one relationship with the host. So it's really great kind of mindset check, but also gives you very specific, tangible things that you can be doing to build your business as a podcast guest.
Definitely. Well, and that is called your Beyond the Stats, How to Be a Great Podcast Guest and Get a Huge Return on Investment as a Guest Expert, valued at $97. So I'm just typing in the question here in case everybody missed it. So the question is, what does Jessica refer to as that page that you send out to host, or that you would submit with your application that tells them exactly about you? It's super easy. It's like, the term is something pager. Come on, people. Someone has to be listening. You must have heard it earlier. We talked about it several times. It's, the PDF that you design. It'll give you the details of your bio. This is, I don't think it was here then. Oh, that's Jonathan. Something pager. And it's a term that we use in press. It's literally no more than a page.
Hint, hint.
We're going to make this easy. Hint, hint, 3-letter word, a page, something pager. Okay, we'll give people a bit of time to catch up with that. But bio page, what would you say, Jessica? Is that close enough?
Sure.
No? Yeah, there you go. The answer is one page. Like, your one pager. It's literally a PR term for saying everything about you on one page. That's a PDF, downloadable, printable, with your bio, your hooks, and how to contact you. We didn't mention that as well. Like, what are your contacts and all of that? So let me put here. How would you like Jonathan to get in touch with you? Jessica?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were directing it at the person that answered it. So,
yes. However, he can get in contact with you to claim his prize.
Oh, email me at jessica@interviewconnections.com.
Oh, there you go. Well, congrats, Jonathan. I'm sure you're going to find that super exciting and be able to use that. So that's why it pays to pay attention and be here on Mimika TV. I make it so easy, people. Seriously, we just need to pay attention. And usually I'm giving away the answer before I actually ask the question. Yay! Okay, so I know we've covered a ton of content and we could sit here and talk about a whole bunch of things and everywhere, but definitely for those who recently joined us, I guarantee you're going to get great value out of what Jessica had to offer and share with us today. So make sure you watch the replay. And for those who want to get more information, we want to be able to make it easy for our guests and being as a guest for our hosts in order for you to get booked on. So if you had to round it up into one more tip, what was another thing that you would give our audience as a great way to get booked as a podcast guest?
Well, I would say be a guest expert with interviewconnections.com. I mean, quite honestly, I don't want to be like pitchy or anything, but when you align yourself with somebody that has a lot of connections, we're booking hundreds of interviews per month. That is a fast tracked way. So, but you could start out just by getting connected with me. Read my blog, Jessica Rhodes. That's RHO. You can see it right there on the screen. JessicaRhodes.biz. Just start reading my blog. Get connected with me on Twitter, social media, and if there's any way we can help you get booked, we definitely will. But I've got a ton of information on all my websites. I do videos, podcasts, blogs. So, hang out with me, and I'll get you there.
Exactly. So reach out to Jessica and have a look. I know I get your newsletter. I think you send it once a month now, right?
I do.
Even regular more. You're doing it more often now.
I do a weekly email newsletter, and I do a monthly newsletter through the mail. So if I get your address, your mailing address, we will put you on our list for getting that newsletter in the mail.
Perfect. Well, there you go. So make sure to reach out to Jessica. Tell her you saw her on Mimika TV, and thanks for her great content that she had to share. And I see her, even Angela is online. And Angela is the one that she works with you. She's one of your agents, right? I know she's helped me get booked on several guests, several shows, which is super useful, especially if you don't have time to be your own publicist or PR agent. This is a great way to, and it's very affordable for you to be able to leverage your time, especially if you are already hosting your own shows, but you want to sort of like find other places that you can be. That's a great way to be connected. So if you enjoyed today's content, make sure to subscribe to our channel here on Blab on Mimika TV. Every week we are here Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as you noticed, every week our guests kindly donate to our goodie giveaway. So it pays to play and be and pay attention and be on here live. But if you're watching the replay, make sure you can go grab some more goodies. Now, I personally have rebranded myself and really have gone to town about showing people my expertise in video marketing. So if you want to be able to rock your own blabs, look great on camera, I give you some lighting and equipment techniques. Go to my website, mimikacooney.com, and I offer a free video toolkit that'll help you, also a nice, easy to print PDF that'll help you lay out some tips for sound quality. We didn't even mention that, right? Mm-hmm. Having good sound equipment, lighting equipment. You want to make the best possible quality recording for both you and your host to make things easier. So what are your recommended equipment, Jessica?
Well, I use the ATR 2100, which is a great affordable mic that sounds really wonderful. And then having the earbuds, you can both see that we have those in to reduce the echo. Honestly, if those are the two things that you have as a guest, you're going to be set. I mean, you can obviously go bigger and better, but if you're just being a podcast guest, having a really good microphone is huge.
Mm-hmm. And internet connection, especially if these podcasts are recording on Skype, has not been happy lately. It's been a moody teenager. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I always recommend
having a strong internet connection.
I recommend restarting your computer and restarting Skype right before you start. Like I restarted my computer 15 minutes before this lab just so that it was a fresh start.
Exactly. So let me type in do you have like a download or something people can get off your website?
Yes, I actually have a 5-part video series on how to rock the podcast from both sides of the mic. If they go to interviewconnections.com, they can opt into my list there and get a 5-part video series on how to rock the podcast from both sides of the mic.
Perfect. I'm just typing it in there. So I like to be able to put the links. That's what I love about Blab is that you can go and put the links and people can click straight on here to take directly to your website. And if you've enjoyed what Jessica had to say, definitely retweet and click and connect with her on Twitter too. That's what I love about Blab as well. Making those connections. And if you're interested in being booked on a guest, reach out to them. The team's great and interview connections. And I'm just going to put here for those who might want to grab that. Make your own video and audio podcast sound and look great by grabbing that toolkit. So I'm going to say thanks again for joining me. Thanks everyone for being here live and for your interaction. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place on Mimika TV. Thanks again. Take care.
Bye.